I normally don't worry so much about developing the character before I start. I sort of have just a little bit of an idea. I mean, I know more, but I just want to present a little bit of an idea. And the way I try to develop the character, if I'm doing my best work, is by putting him through the ringer and seeing how he reacts. So he's sitting in prison, and the first line of the book is, I'm serving 5 years for the murder of my own child. Spoiler alert, I didn't do it. So how is he feeling about that? And then when his sister-in-law comes very early, I'm not giving anything away, and shows him a photograph that may have his son still alive, how does he react to that news? And so I developed the character by how they react, how they talk. But I'm not one, like certain writers will sit there and they'll do outlines, and they'll write bios. They'll write 50, I know one writer's like, I love Buddy. So when I created Myron, I wanted to give him a sidekick. I love sidekicks in stories. And you know, the sort of, the tough urban guy had been done, the computer nerd had been done. So I took my college roommate, who has a name equally obnoxious to Windsor Hornlock III. Ridiculously good-looking blonde guy. And when we were in college, we were best friends, and everyone thought we would never get. I remember first day getting to Amherst College, and in those days, Facebook was a book. We got a little bit around here, so you know what I'm talking about. You guys aren't yet proud, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about Facebook online. And I remember looking at this guy in this pompous space, and I mean, like Windsor Hornlock III, and I go to my dad, I don't even see this guy in my 4 years of college. Nonetheless, to be friends with him, we met first day and became best friends. So I wanted to take it, and but by the way, this is in truth, he would look in the mirror before we'd go out to like a fraternity party, and he'd go, it must suck to be ugly. I remember one time we were in college, this big young football coach was picking on him because again, he had his patrician looks, and he started to go after Wynn, started to go after him like he was going to fight him. In real life, he would be dead in about 4 seconds, and I'm grabbing him off. But it got my mind thinking, like, well, what if he really started to work on that because he was getting picked on, and wouldn't that be an interesting angle to have the rich guy be? So all these things kind of mess in your head. And then I just put Myron and one in a room. A lot of the conversations are what he and I have, and it just kind of worked. He became a little more damaged than unexpected. And writing him was interesting, but that's the creation of Wynn. And to answer the next question, because I'm pretty sure I know what it is, yes, I'm going to write Myron and Wynn again, which is always, thank you. And in fact, this book I'm working on now, so the next book will be Myron and Wynn. I started it. In the first page, Myron's father calls him from Florida, where he now lives, and tells Myron that he and his mom have discovered edibles. So that's how we'll go. I'm not exactly sure where we'll go from there, but it'll be someplace. Just keep this in the room. This is just between us. I don't want Netflix to know. It'll be very exciting. But I will do my best to make it as true to the series. That one I want to make true. I should point out that I think the worst adaptations are slavishly devoted to the text. If you're the kind of person who read The Stranger and want to see the exact same thing on the screen, I'm not your guy. It was my decision to make The Stranger, when the book was a man, into a woman played by Hannah John Kamen. I didn't think it worked well on screen, so I love to make changes. I love to move to other countries. But Myron, no, that would be different. Myron's a different thing for me. And I'll worry because I'm going to write Myron again. I don't want you to see whatever actor that they have in your head. I'd rather keep the little vision that you have in your head.
And so is Wynn the next one coming to Netflix?
Well, Wynn will be with Myron. It's a Myron and Wynn series. And then, I don't know, maybe if it does well, maybe they'll do a Wynn spin-off. But the Myron will be first. Myron and Wynn together.
So now let's talk a little bit about Wild, which, when I first started reading it, it was really kind of like, who is this? Where was the inspiration from Wild?
This is an easy one because I do remember exactly how I came up with the idea. And for those who want to write in the room, most of my ideas come from what if. Basically, my default position is to ask what if all the time, no matter what I'm doing. The more bored I am, the more I'm asking what if and trying to figure out a circumstance. So to be very specific, I was hiking through the woods of the Ramapo Mountains in New Jersey. And I know it's in, but I really hate hiking. I don't get the appeal. I mean, I like walking through city streets or through browsing wonderful bookstores like Whiter's Block. I get that. I like window shopping. I like looking at faces. But I'm like, oh, look, a tree. Another freaking tree. Another tree. It's so goddamn hot out here. Is there a snack bar? Why am I climbing up? Like, I'm so bored and I'm hot and I'm uncomfortable and with my whole family. And I'm whining with my family and ranting the same way I'm ranting at you foreign people. And as I'm doing that, getting bored and hot, I see on a parallel path a boy about 5 or 6 walking by himself. I say, what if that kid just came out of the woods right now and said, I've always lived in the woods. I don't remember any life before that. I would break into cabins or live off the land. I don't remember any parents. I've always been on my own. He has a Tarzanish kind of quality to him. And what if 30 years pass and you still don't know? He still doesn't know what happened to him. And another kid goes missing. And so now all of a sudden I'm hiking being very quiet. And I'm going like this as I'm thinking about that. And then I went home and I started to tool around with it and work it happen. And next thing you knew, I had wild. And I said, well, what would he be like? You know, he would probably still want to live in the woods. He'd be a little damaged. He'd have trouble getting close to people. It's interesting, I'm always like, oh, he's the suburban happy father guy. But that ain't Myron, that ain't Wynn, that ain't Wild. Wild is a real loner. I've never really written a loner like that. So again, I'm always trying to do something different, and that's how Wild came into being. And I always knew when I started to write Wild, the first book, I'm like, well, I'm not giving his origin story here. I'm not giving his Batman was killed, parents were killed, and that's why he became Batman moment. So that's when I decided, even when I was writing the first one, I knew there would be a second one, the match. So I knew that would be the one that would tell that story.
And you talked about, all your characters being slightly damaged. Is that telling us a little bit more about you?
No. I'm perfect. I have like no flaws. It's really kind of amazing. I think what readers want is somebody who they want to hang with, but not necessarily somebody who is too true or good that can be boring. I mean, Myron is good, but Myron's also self-deprecating and dorky. When I created Myron, in fact, the reason I gave the name Myron was I thought when I visioned Myron, this is what I mean by don't create characters too much before you write. I thought Myron was going to be like really cool, and wouldn't it be cool to have this really cool guy who had a nerdy name Myron? And of course, Myron's a dork. He's the one that he gets. He's the one that Esperanza and Big Cindy and Wynn make fun of. And that wasn't planned. It's just, it's like at the mall in a room. It's like, so when I was first writing Deal Breaker, the very first Myron book, I didn't have Esperanza character, I had Big Cindy's character. And this is also what sometimes as an editor. And so Myron goes in his office and Big Cindy is there. And an early reader, this is when I was, I was like nobody. And they said, you know what? This is going back to the early 90s. Probably be better to have like a babe in the office rather than this Big Cindy in the office. I thought about it a moment, and all of a sudden, Esperanza came about, and I created Esperanza, and I put Big Cindy away. And like a book or two later, they needed help in the office. Big Cindy's in my subconscious, like this, like get me out of here. And so that's how she came about. So it's weird, like everything can kind of influence what you do, and there's often, I've learned more than one way to tell the story.
So is there any chance that just like Hester popped out into her own book, we're going to see our own Big Cindy book?
Anything could happen. So I always start with an idea. Like I just gave you the idea for the boy from the woods. I'll give you a couple more just so you can see sort of how it works. So, and then I say who's going to tell the story. So the longest example and the most detailed I can do is tell no one. So when I came with Tell No One, I'd written 7 straight Myron books. And I came up with this idea. There's 2 things that influenced me. One, this is what I mean by anything can stimulate an idea. I was watching a really crummy romance movie on TV. I won't mention the name of the movie, Message in the Bottle. And it was one of those stories that's like a million times. No offense, Nick's a good friend of mine. Nick is a good friend. But it's like, the man loses his wife. It's right there. And he can't go on. And then a hot babe walks by and it's fine. You notice that, ladies? In these movies, all of a sudden the guy's perky again. So I said to myself, again, in those moments I get serious, what about the man who can't go on? What about the man who really lost his soulmate? Is there a way I can find redemption for him. So at this part of the idea, and it's over here. The second part of the idea is, I mentioned again before that I'd lost my parents at a young age and how much I loved and adored them. And I had young kids, and I was thinking the same way we all do. Wouldn't it be great if they were alive? Wouldn't it be great if they could meet their grandkids? And as I was doing that, I was on a webcam, and I said, what would I do right now if I saw my parents on this webcam, a wish? And I took the two ideas, and I smashed them together. A man and a woman happily married, the wife is murdered, 8 years pass, he can't get over her death, he gets an email, he clicks a hyperlink, he sees a webcam, and his dead wife walks by. And little Homer Simpson part of my brain goes, woo! And this sounds like it took 10 minutes, right? This is 3 months of work, ladies and gentlemen. This is 3 months of sitting on my couch going, no, honey, I can't throw out the garbage. I'm working. Can't you see I'm working? Hardest part of my job, convincing my wife I have it. So then, think of the ending. So that's how I came about with other ideas. And then I realized at that time, I'd written 7 Myron books in a row. I'm like, well, Myron didn't have a wife who died 8 years ago. He can't be the one who tells this story. And so I created Dr. David Beck, a pediatrician, inner city pediatrician, which my wife was. I'm an extraordinarily lazy researcher, we'll get to that in a moment. But by shocking coincidence, my wife is a pediatrician, so my research is, honey, what would happen if, and then Gone for Good, and there's 5 or 6 others that I did, and then I had another idea for a book. So I overheard teenagers who I adore talking about drinking and driving. And I pulled them aside, I said, promise me, title of the book, you won't do that. Here's my cell phone number, I don't care what you're on, what you're doing, I won't tell your parents, just don't get in the car with someone who's been drinking. I'll pick you up wherever you are, blah, blah, blah. Some of you have probably made a similar promise. In real life, nothing else happened. But again, fiction writing is asking, what if? Well, what if a teenage girl calls my hero? He goes and picks her up in New York City when she's drunk out of her mind, drops her off at what she says is a friend's house. The next day she's gone, no one knows where she is. That was promised me. Then again, I would say, now who's going to tell the story? Well, Myron would make a stupid promise like that, wouldn't he? Myron with his hero complex? It's time to bring Myron back. So after 6 years, that's how I do it. So I come up with an idea, and then I see who's going to tell the story. People asked me to write a Win book for years. I never really wanted to, but I had this idea about a stolen Vermeer and the Upper West Side, a rich apartment, a rich porter. That's Win's world. So Win's going to be the one who tells that particular story. Or it's the case, Grace Lawson or some of the female characters. Whatever it is, I'm the idea first. I don't start with that character first. That was really a look inside the brain right there. And it's not pretty. I always say a novel's like a sausage. You might like the final taste. You probably don't want to know how it was made.
So I will follow up a little bit with the new book. What was the inspiration?
I don't remember. It's really weird. I don't remember in this case. I think it was that first sentence. I want to start a book where the person was in the lowest spot possible, and yet make still this book a book that has redemption and joy and humor. And so if you're worried about the subject matter, don't be. It's actually fun, which is like a challenge. Like, how do I make this kind of thing fun? But starting off in that position, and again, it was one of those, wow, that's a really okay, a guy thinks his son is dead, murdered, and that he was accused of killing him, and now the son may still be alive. I mean, what wouldn't you do to get out of jail? What wouldn't you do to find out? And then there's a little homage to The Count of Monte Cristo and The Fugitive. It's that kind of a thing, but done very differently. And I wanted a really emotion-packed ending. I think this is a more emotion-packed. And the final thing is all books are roller coasters, but roller coasters, those who've been to Disney World, you've probably heard of it. There's those rides that go, roller coasters go up like that and then they drop down. Have you been in the Aerosmith one here? Shoots out like this. So this book I think this may be my fastest paced novel. You guys can decide that word, not count. But I wanted to shoot out right in the first sentence, first word, and get you started. So I think all those things mixed in together, and I was thinking about a funny retirement village I always want to write about. So there's always a bunch of things that I'm thinking about that all end up in one book.
Do you ever think that Wild and Wind will hook up
A
something?
Wild and Wind book? Or go against each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like when Marvel has like Hulk fight Thor. I haven't thought about it, but maybe I will do that. You know, it's like I say, because I don't normally start with character, I don't know if Wild will be back. But there will be some time. I would not be surprised in a Myron book, maybe in this book I'm writing now. Characters just pop up. You know, characters from other books just show up. As long as I can now legally do it because of Netflix now and Prime, I would not be surprised to one day see them back. But I also, as a writer, like if I have a good idea while I'm writing, it somehow finds its way into the book. When I wrote Win, it was like I wanted to do, 60s radicals, I wanted to do an art heist, I wanted to do a hoarder who had been lost, I wanted to do a Patty Hearst type kidnapping, and so I had all these ideas, and they all ended up in the same book. So if I have an idea, it always ends up in the same book. I'm like a boxer who is fighting 15 rounds, and I'm not leaving one punch on the table. When I'm finished, I'm like, there will be no rematch, Howard. I can't lift my arms. I have no ideas. I am the blankest slate in the world, so I have no idea what I'm going to do next, and then we'll see what happens.
Two questions. I listened to the audible versions of your books, and do you actually know Stephen Weber and Scott Brigg, who do a lot of reading for you, and they're just magnificent?
Yeah, I know both of them. Weber's a good friend of mine. Weber, when he was, I forget what show he was on, he actually sent me a handwritten letter. He read one of the Myron books. And we became friends and still are friends. And he had never done an audio book. And the first one he did was Tell No One, which he won the Audi Award for. I guess it's an Innie Award too, I don't know. He won the Audi Award for it, and we've been partners since. Scott Brick did a couple that Weber couldn't do, and Scott's a great reader and a great guy too. But I just thought Weber kind of captured, first of all, it's fun, but he also captures the wise-ass kind of attitude that a lot of the characters do, and he really gets, it's funny, he gets very excited, and he doesn't read the book before he gets into the studio because he wants to be surprised as he's reading, for that to reflect in his reading. So, audio has become a really big thing the last few years, and I'm grateful to have, as long as Weber, and I have January LaVoy off of the female voice, and she's a wonderful reader too. I've been very lucky. I read one myself, it was horrendous. I finally convinced them to redo it. It's really hard, first of all, like, they put you in a room, and, I'm a fast-talking Jew from New Jersey, but when you do an audio reading, you speak at about this pace. So they're constantly saying, slow down, that's the wrong voice, there's a southern accent there, you're supposed to be a woman right there, not a guy. They also give you a pillow in case your stomach growls because it ruins the tape. So I spent like 5 days doing that in a row. And then I'm like, oh, thank God it's over. They'll cut it up. Back in the day, they used to have, do you remember, abridged audio? They don't really do that much anymore. And they'll cut up, they go, no, we don't cut up for the abridged. We do a whole other reading for the abridged. I'm like, why? What came up with that idea? So I do it all over again for the abridged reading. So I said, I'd never do it again. And it got better as time went on, but the first few days were rough.
Thank you for asking.
Well, second question.
Oh, second question.
And then I'm done, I promise. Can we get more Max and Sarah?
Oh, thank you. Max and Sarah are characters that are in.
That was hilarious.
Oh, thank you. They're the FBI agents in the book you're about to read. I hope I will find you. And I know there'll be controversy because half you will hate them and half you will love them. They're like the dancing killers if you watch the TV series Stay Close. Half the people who watch that show love those two, and half hated it, and I loved it. I wouldn't want it any other way. I think of Max and Sarah, at least something similar. I would not be surprised to see them back at some point. They were fun to write. Thank you. Thank you.
You mentioned your process. In the middle of your stories, do the characters or the story just go off the rails at times? And when that happens, how do you respond? How do you know it, and what do you do about it?
Yeah, so the question is what happens when the story kind of goes off the rails. That's actually the best moment in a book, So this is what I'm talking about character. You'll think to yourself, I'm going to do, this character is going to go X and Y will happen, and then they go to X and Y doesn't happen. Something else happens, and that's usually when the book becomes its strongest. So I wrote a number of years ago, I wrote a Myron book, where Myron was going into a no-tell motel. You know what I mean, like a real slip. Thank you, sir. You've been there, right? Thank you. You know, one of the signs saying now featuring towels. And then always a color TV. I love that. I say hotel black and white TV. Color TV. And the C is in red, the O is in green, yellow is in orange. Too many people are nodding along with me right now. Hourly rates, you know, vibrating bed, the whole thing. And so Myron was going in, and he was going to question the guy behind the desk to get this information. And in your mind, you're writing the scene, right? The guy's going to have a ripped t-shirt, he's going to be unshaven, kind of like me right now. He's going to be burping up beer, Myron's going to slip him a 20, the guy's going to give the information. And when I had Myron walk in, instead of this really crummy, sleazy motel, it's a really beautiful desk, and the guy's in tails, and he takes his job just really seriously. It's like, if you're going to commit adultery, you can do it in comfort and style. And it changed the whole scene. The guy wouldn't take money to give him the information. So first of all, it gives comic possibilities to the scene, makes the scene. Somehow that feels more real, right? That a guy who took this job would actually take it seriously. And Myron doesn't get the information I want, so he's got to find it away. My Siri watch is asking me to say that again, but I'm not. So that's the kind of thing that, and then the story becomes stronger for her. So it happens all the time where I put a character here, and I don't know where it's going to go. So like when I write a book, I know the beginning and the end. I compared being in my home state of New Jersey, across the country, California, LA, where the ending. So I always end up in LA, but I may go via the Suez Canal or stop in Tokyo, but I end up in LA. But I don't know, I never have any idea how, I know a few places along the way, but I never know how I'm going to get there, and it's never the route I think.
In the series you write about some of the books, or the movies, how do you end up in Great Britain, and where does that come from?
Yeah, you know, I did a series, I admired a series, this woman named Nicholas Schindler who I worked with, and she had done a couple of series that I really admired, one called Happy Valley, Last Tango in Halifax, Queer as Folk, and she wanted to buy one of my books at one point, and I didn't have that one available, it was optioned by somebody, and I had this idea that I'd been toying with for a TV series, and I told her in 2 sentences, and like 10 minutes later, Sky Network had bought it. It was called, I don't see Harlan Coben's The Five, which is hard to find out because Netflix doesn't have the rights to it right now. And once we worked, I really loved working with that team, the same head writer guy named Danny Brocklehurst, and I really enjoyed the experience, and they all became monster hits. So we kept doing them, Netflix joined on board. I had already done a couple of productions in France, Tell No One, the movie, never seen it, it's really, they did a really good job of having Guillaume Canet directed it. I actually sell more books overseas than I sell in the US. It's a weird thing. France is my biggest country. I am the Jerry Lewis of crime. I keep whining to my German publisher, I want to be the David Hasselhoff. Get on. And so Netflix bought me, or started a deal. The idea was they wanted to make them, and I did too, all over the world. I want to have one in every country if I can. I think it's fun. It makes an interesting hybrid. It makes the stories different. If you watch The Innocent, Netflix Spain, that's really different than the British shows, which have humor and kind of fun. It's really good. It's probably our best reviewed. The Innocent, but it's dark and it's violent. So I love, and the Polish have a whole other language to them, and I really enjoyed having that variety and working with great people in each of these countries. Thank you.
Who's your favorite author to read?
Me. I don't really see, I just told you how many shows I got going. I don't really see me to. My all-time favorite is Philip Roth. And it's safe to say that because he's dead. The problem is I never really answer that question because first of all, someone here will put it on social media and one of my friends will call and go, dude. You know, and then I always forget. So like, for example, I just read an advanced reader's copy of Dennis Lehane's next book, Small Mercies. It's great. Highly recommend it, get it. But if I say Dennis Lehane, someone else will go, what about, someone, I'm like, oh yeah, they're really good, they're better. So I will forget and ignore. I like a lot of the same people that you do. And lastly, because I go on the Today Show once every 2 or 3 months to recommend books. If they hear I recommended, oh damn, don't tell anybody I recommended the Lane book, okay? So then I can't recommend that book. So I don't do much book recommending. Plus I'm self-involved and it's all about me.
Well, you still follow college basketball, who are you picking this year?
I have not watched one college basketball game this year. I haven't, and stumbling, stupidly, my book always comes out during March Madness. So I'm like, I was like, Princeton won? You know, it's like one of those things. I'll tell you, I do watch a lot of NFL, and I pointed out to embarrass somebody, because really one of the best NFL announcers, Charles Davis, is right there in the Aqua shirt, Charles Davis. And all the guys who watch the NFL. And Charles, when he does Giants and Jets games at home, that's my favorite, because then I can sit in the booth. And I actually tell him stuff like I know what I'm talking about. Luckily, he never really listens to me. But he's a dear friend. I'm so happy to see you here, my friend. And so I watch a ton of NFL. In fact, there's those, I sign these things called tip-in sheets. So when you're ever wondering, when you go to a lot of stores and have signed copies, what they do is they send us stacks of sheets that we sign, and then they sew them into the book. And they send me literally, I think this time, like 5,000 of them. And so my signature on them is horrible. And I do it most of the time while I'm watching NFL games. And sometimes I'll realize after like, oh, my pen ran out of ink like 50 pages. You guys got much better signatures tonight. It's sort of an HC type thing.
It seems like your brain doesn't stop. What do you do to relax?
I don't relax. I'm not good relaxing. Like I actually learned transcendental meditation, and the reason I actually like that one is because you're allowed to think during it. When people tell me, relax, empty your mind, that's not what you want me to do. You don't want my mind empty. It stresses me out. Even when I'm on vacation, I like to write. It's just, life is about balance. Your relationship with your spouse, your friends, how you're eating, how you're exercising, your work. If I'm not writing, no matter how good the other stuff is, I'm out of balance. I'm very much a writer. And my life is consumed by that. You can probably tell a little bit, I get obsessed. And when you're a writer, people here trying to write, there's always a little voice in my head that says you should be writing. Whenever you're doing something else, if I'm just driving the kids in carpool, you should be home writing. I have no other interests, I have no hobbies, I am an extraordinarily boring person. A few years ago, because I have nothing else besides my family and not writing, I took up golf. Why I didn't smash a glass gem in my eye, I don't know. Instead, I took up golf. But even on days like today, when it's really beautiful and I'm having a great time, there's always a voice in my head that says, you could be writing. That's usually the guy I almost hit with my Aaron t-shirt. But it is become an obsessive thing. And the other thing is we're ridiculously insecure. All of us writers think we're imposters. We all think we suck. I've written 35 books. I still think I suck. Stephen King thinks he sucks. He sent me one book that he had me as a character in, and he was like nervous about my reaction. Like, you're Stephen King. So it doesn't go away. That's what he told me. When it does, that's when you're in trouble. Only bad writers think they're good. If you write up here, you say, no, trust me, they suck. You want nothing to do with that. We're constant, and I'll be waiting. So I'm writing right now. I'm writing a book and I'll be going, oh my God, this is horrendous. I was so good before with I Will Find You. What happened? How did I lose it? 5 minutes later, this is sheer genius. You're going to read that other book that's out there and not get this work of Shakespearean proportion. That goes on within 5 minutes of one another. That's just what I live with.
Thank you so much for your kind words. It's an honor for me to be your friend, and the time that we've spent together means the world to me. I still remember the first game. It was the Jets Rams, which may have been the worst ever.
Oh my God, they were terrible. that's when you were like fifth guy. Now you're like number 1 or 2. So now you get the good games.
Well, that's when I was horrible at but now I'm a genius. No. I remember in that ball game, at one point in the middle of the second quarter, you tapped me on a break, and you said, "Hey, appreciate this. I don't want to, sound grateful, but this is awful." I said, "I agree with you, and you can go, and I wish I could go with you." All that being said, thank you so much for that. But the biggest question I have is family affair. A lot of these things, like this is your life. You say you have other hobbies with your children. Anyone following in your footsteps? Anyone in your family that wants to do what you do?
I'm going to cavil a little bit here and brag. I hate to do this. My oldest daughter writes, and when we were writing The Stranger, I think it was, my partner at Edge Report, Nicholas Schindler, said, "We need younger blood in here." Younger than me. But and she read my daughter's written a couple of pilot scripts just to practice in the shrine. She goes, "Let's bring your daughter Charlotte on board." I'm like, "Well, only if really, I want nothing to do with her. When she's her, I don't want to be around her. I don't want to talk to her. I don't like her very much. We don't work well together. We're too much alike." And she did really, really well. We kept her on. And she gave us a lot of good ideas. She did all of sort of the teen story in Stranger, because that wasn't the book, but we wanted a teen story in the series. And then she did Stay Close, and she wrote most of Shelter, the young adult series, because she gets that voice better than I do. But I'm losing her because she got her own series picked up that she's going to be doing a 6-episode series. So I'm trying her so I can ease back and sort of retire a little bit, and she's dumping me, is what I'm saying. Trying to remind her about the inheritance thing. It's not working. But she's really talented. And my other kids right now show no talent. They're all like their mother. They're smart as hell, and they're my daughter who's graduating Brown this year her major is computational biology. I don't know what. And when she tries to explain, whoa, it's Dad's not smart. Dad's gonna make stuff up for a living. And my second son, who owns parental writing, just graduated from Rice University, is in flight control at NASA in Houston. So he's a literal rocket scientist. And when they explain to me I don't get it at all. But Charlotte, Charlotte's the writer in the family, and I can't wait for her. She's going to be filming a series. She'll be gone for 3 months filming her own series. And then I told her, season 2 of Shelter we're going to be making. You got to get your ass back here.